Welcome to my channel, HFY Story Hub. The alien princess watched the human smile while an entire moon burned behind him. Not panic. Not fear. A smile. And in that moment, Princess Lyra of the Valari Dominion understood why entire star systems whispered about humanity like a curse. The war had already begun. The sky above Valaris Prime split open with fire. Thousands of enemy warships emerged from hyperspace like black knives tearing through reality itself. Sirens screamed across the capital city. Towering crystal bridges shook. Civilians flooded the streets in terror. And standing beside Lyra on the palace balcony, the human simply stared upward. Calm. Too calm. They came early, he said softly. Another explosion thundered across the horizon. The princess turned toward him, her silver eyes trembling. The Dravik fleet is impossible to stop. Our defenses were supposed to hold for another week. Elias Ward didn't answer immediately. That frightened her more. Because humans always talked when they were afraid. But Elias had gone silent. Far below, Valari defense cannons opened fire. Blue plasma streaked into the heavens. One Dravik cruiser shattered instantly. Then 3 more replaced it. The enemy fleet kept coming. Relentless. Like predators smelling blood. Lyra's throat tightened. 30 billion lives are on this world. I know, Elias replied. He spoke those words the way soldiers spoke at funerals. Not hopefully. Certainly. The palace doors burst open behind them. General Xerox stormed onto the balcony, armored tail lashing violently. The massive reptilian commander glared at Elias with open disgust. This is your fault, human. Lyra immediately stepped forward. General, you married him. Xerox roared. You brought humanity into our dominion, and now the Dravik attack our homeworld. Another explosion shook the palace. Dust rained from the ceiling. Servants screamed somewhere deeper inside. Elias finally looked at the general. No anger. No defensiveness. Just that same terrifying calm. You're wrong, he said quietly. The human stepped toward the balcony edge, watching burning ships fall through the atmosphere. They aren't attacking because of me. A Dravik battleship emerged through the clouds overhead. Gigantic. Ancient. Its hull covered in scars from forgotten wars. The entire city darkened beneath its shadow. Then Elias spoke words that made the blood freeze inside Lyra's veins. They came because humanity disappeared. Silence. Even General Xerox stopped moving. Lyra stared at her husband. What does that mean? Elias didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, he removed a small metal object from inside his dark military coat. A silver ring. Old. Scratched. Burned at the edges. Human writing covered its surface. Lyra had seen him hold it before during quiet moments when he thought nobody was watching. But now his hand trembled slightly. For the first time since the invasion began, the human looked afraid. They found Earth, he whispered. The palace lights suddenly died. Darkness swallowed the balcony. A second later, emergency crimson lights flooded the city. The planetary shield had fallen. Panic erupted below. Military transports screamed through the air between skyscrapers. Crowds pushed against evacuation gates. Fires spread across the lower districts like glowing rivers. Then the broadcasts began. Every screen across the capital activated simultaneously. A towering armored figure appeared. Dravik. 8 feet tall. Black armor. Eyes glowing red like furnace embers. Supreme Warlord Kale. The Butcher of 9 systems. The being who had exterminated entire civilizations without mercy. His distorted voice rolled across the planet. People of Valaris. Behind him floated hundreds of shattered human ships. Lyra's breath caught painfully. Human vessels. Destroyed. Burning. Dead. Kale smiled slowly. We warned the galaxy what would happen to those who sheltered humans. Elias stared at the screen without blinking. But Lyra noticed something horrifying. His hands were clenched so tightly they were bleeding. We searched for their homeworld for 20 years, Kale continued. Now humanity is finished. Earth burns. Their fleets are ash. Their species dies alone. The Dravik warlord leaned closer to the transmission. And yet one human still hides here. Kale's burning eyes locked directly onto Elias. We are coming for you, last survivor. The transmission ended. Silence consumed the balcony. Then the city alarms became screams. Dropships. Thousands of them. They tore through the clouds toward the surface. The invasion had begun. General Xerox spun toward Elias in horror. Last survivor. Lyra slowly looked at her husband. At the man she had married to secure peace between species. At the quiet human diplomat who never spoke about his past. At the soldier who woke from nightmares almost every night. You lied to me, she whispered. Elias closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, something inside him had changed. The warmth was gone. The softness, gone. What remained felt ancient, sharp, dangerous. I didn't lie, he said quietly. You hid this from me. Yes. Why? Another explosion rocked the city. Closer now. Screams echoed through the streets below. Elias looked toward the descending enemy fleet. Then finally answered. Because if the galaxy knew what humanity really was. A Dravik cruiser crashed into the distant skyline, sending fire across the horizon. They would fear us more than extinction. General Xerox snarled. One human cannot stop this invasion. Elias slowly turned toward him. And smiled. Not kindly. Not reassuringly. It was the smile of a predator finally cornered. That, Elias said softly, is where you're wrong. The palace suddenly shook violently. A deafening boom echoed from beneath the city itself. Then another. And another. The ground trembled. Lyra grabbed the balcony railing as the entire capital seemed to wake beneath them. What was that? She gasped. Elias looked downward. Toward the ancient foundations buried beneath Valaris Prime. Toward something hidden deep underground. Something only he understood. Then the human whispered 5 words that changed everything. Earth wasn't humanity's first home. The ground beneath Valaris Prime screamed. Not metaphorically. Not figuratively. The planet itself screamed like something had been awakened after 1,000 years of silence. Elias didn't move. He just closed his eyes, as if listening. General Xerox staggered back. What have you done? Lyra clutched the balcony rail as shockwaves rippled through the capital. Towers swayed. Crystal streets cracked. Deep beneath the city, something massive was shifting, metallic groans echoing through ancient tunnels that should not have existed. Elias finally spoke. Humanity never lived on just one world. Another explosion thundered above them as Dravik dropships filled the sky like falling knives. But now, something below answered. A second pulse hit the ground. Stronger. Closer. Then the earth split open. Not metaphorically. Literally. Across the capital, massive sections of terrain lifted upward like petals opening. Entire districts rose on hidden platforms. Beneath them, structures. Gigantic. Ancient. Human-made. Lyra's eyes widened in horror. That's impossible. Elias stepped toward the edge of the balcony. His voice was quieter now. We didn't expand into space like everyone thinks, he said. We woke up in it. A third shockwave hit. And then the sky changed. Far above the planet's atmosphere, something massive activated. Not a fleet. Not a defense system. A dormant orbital continent. Thousands of kilometers wide. Covered in dormant weapon arrays. Sleeping for centuries. General Xerox's voice cracked. Those signatures, those are human. Elias nodded once. They were always here. The Dravik fleet hesitated. Just for a moment. Long enough for fear to enter their formation. Then the orbital structure began to rotate. Slowly. Like a predator turning its head. And every weapon on its surface came online at once. The night sky turned white. The first beam struck a Dravik cruiser. It didn't explode. It simply vanished. Erased from existence. Another beam followed. Then 10. Then hundreds. The invading fleet broke formation instantly. Panic spread through enemy channels. Warlord Kale's voice returned across planetary comms, no longer confident. What is this? This is not in the intelligence reports. Elias watched the destruction quietly. Lyra turned toward him, shaking. What is that thing? Elias hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. That, he said slowly, is a shepherd array. General Xerox snapped his head toward him. A what? Elias looked at the burning sky. It was built before humanity had a name for itself. Before we called ourselves Earthborn. Before we forgot what we were. Another Dravik ship disappeared in silence. The orbital structure continued waking. Layer by layer. Section by section. Like something remembering how to kill. Lyra stepped closer to Elias. You said Earth was destroyed. Elias didn't answer immediately. The silence between them stretched. Then, that's what the galaxy believes. A cold feeling spread through Lyra's chest. You're telling me it's not true. Elias finally met her eyes. And what she saw there made her heart stop. Grief. Not for a planet. But for a lie too large to carry alone. Earth wasn't our origin, he said quietly. It was our quarantine. The words made no sense. Until the orbital structure fired again. This time, the beam didn't target ships. It targeted space itself. Reality bent. A hidden layer of the void tore open like fabric. And behind it, something impossible appeared. More ships. Not Dravik. Not Valari. Human ships. Millions of them. Sleeping. Hidden inside folded dimensions. Waiting. General Xerox stepped back in disbelief. How many of them are there? Elias's voice dropped. I don't know anymore. A massive transmission crackled through planetary channels again. Warlord Kale returned. But now his voice trembled with something new. Fear. You are extinct, Kale snarled. We burned your homeworld. We... Elias interrupted softly. No, he said. And for the first time, the galaxy heard his true voice. Calm. Heavy. Final. You found the wrong Earth. Silence. Even the Dravik fleet stopped firing. Lyra stared at him. What does that mean? Elias looked up at the burning sky. At the awakening fleet. At the weapons older than recorded history. And whispered. It means humanity has been dead for a very long time. A pause. Then the orbital superstructure locked onto every remaining enemy vessel in orbit. And something else has been pretending to be us. The system went silent. Every Dravik channel went dark. And then, the human fleet began to move. Not like soldiers. Not like a navy. Like something hunting after a long sleep. And in that moment, the galaxy finally understood the truth it had been avoiding for centuries. Humans were not defending their home. They were waking up inside someone else's war. And they were very, very hungry. The sky above Valaris Prime stopped looking like a battlefield. And started looking like a verdict. The human fleet, what remained of it, had fully transformed. Not into a formation. Not into a defense grid. Into a single, impossible structure spanning orbit like a broken halo of steel and light. Every Dravik ship paused. Even Warlord Kale stopped speaking. Because something had changed in the silence. Not fear. Not confidence. Recognition. Elias stood on the shattered balcony, staring upward as if seeing something he had not looked at in a very long time. Princess Lyra stepped closer, her voice trembling. Elias, what did you activate? He didn't answer immediately. The black shard in his hand had gone dark now, like it had finished its purpose and no longer cared about being understood. General Xerox growled low. You've been lying from the beginning. That thing, that fleet, that's not defense. Elias finally spoke. It never was. A distant explosion shook the upper atmosphere. But it didn't feel like war anymore. It felt like something closing. The Dravik fleet surged one last time. Kale's voice exploded across all channels. We will not be erased. And then the human structure responded. Not with weapons. Not with fire. With memory. A pulse spread outward from the human formation. And every Dravik ship it touched froze again. But this time, something different happened. Inside their ships, the Dravik screamed. Not in pain. In understanding. Lyra grabbed her head as images flooded her vision through residual psychic channels, ancient echoes leaking from the battlefield itself. She saw Earth. Not burning. Not destroyed. But sealed. She saw human cities buried beneath layers of planetary containment. She saw fleets not launched, but locked away. And she saw humanity standing before a choice no species should ever make. Elias spoke quietly, almost like he was remembering someone else's words. "We didn't lose Earth," he said. "We locked it." General Xeroc's voice cracked. "Locked it from what?" Elias looked at the sky. And for the first time, there was no soldier left in his expression. Only exhaustion. "From ourselves." The Dravik fleet tried to fire again. But their weapons didn't respond. Because every system they had rebuilt, every adaptation they had evolved, every weapon they had designed to counter humanity, was now being overwritten. Not destroyed. Rewritten. Kale's voice returned, but it was no longer arrogant. It was broken. "What are you doing to us?" he whispered. Elias lifted his head and spoke the final truth of humanity. "We're finishing what we started before we forgot how to stop." The human structure in orbit unfolded one last time. A shape emerged at its center. Not a ship. Not a weapon. A sealed archive core the size of a moon. And it began broadcasting. Every species in the galaxy would hear it. Every alliance. Every empire. Every warlord. Lyra turned to Elias, her voice shaking. "If you activate that, everyone will know what humans are." Elias nodded slowly. "Yes." General Xeroc stepped forward in panic. "That will start a galactic war." Elias looked at him, and for the first time, he smiled gently. "No," he said. "It will end the ones that shouldn't exist." Above them, the archive core opened, and the truth spilled into the galaxy like light breaking through a cracked universe. Humanity was not a victim, not a conqueror, not extinct. It was a containment species, a civilization built not to rule worlds, but to imprison things that reality itself could not safely remember. The Dravik were not an invasion force. They were a breach, a mistake that escaped something older than war. Kale's voice returned one last time, but now it was quiet, almost reverent. "You were never supposed to leave the cage," he whispered. Elias closed his eyes. "We didn't." A pause. "We just stopped being the ones inside it." The containment pulse activated. Not destroying the Dravik. Not erasing them. Locking them into a deeper layer of existence, one they could not escape, adapt to, or corrupt. The battlefield above Valaris Prime went silent. The fleet disappeared. Not gone. Not dead. Contained. And then, stillness. For the first time since the invasion began. No explosions. No alarms. Only the sound of a galaxy exhaling in disbelief. Lyra slowly turned to Elias. "You saved us," she whispered. Elias didn't respond immediately. He looked up at the empty sky, at the absence where a war had been, and answered softly, "No." A pause. "We just reminded the galaxy why we were never supposed to be needed." The wind moved through the broken balcony. Sirens faded in the distance. And for the first time since she met him, Lyra saw Elias not as a husband, not as a soldier, but as something far more terrifying. A guardian of things the universe was never meant to understand. She stepped closer anyway, because despite everything, he was still standing between her world and the dark. And as the stars slowly returned to normal, one truth remained across the galaxy. Humans were not feared because they destroyed worlds. They were feared because they decided which ones deserved to stay.